Sal reluctantly plodded his way down the corridor to the passenger mess hall. He had already eaten in his quarters, but after a restless night full of nightmares from the day before, he certainly didn't feel up to the day's tasks. Apart from yesterday's incident, all was well. The transition to warp had gone smoothly. The Zillion was still sleeping off his injuries in the brig, and no one else was hurt any worse than a few light bruises, and the Pink One hadn't emerged from his quarters to kill them all. The data slate clenched in Sal's hands felt heavier than it should have. The incident report was mostly complete. He just needed a few final details before he could hand it over to the authorities with the prisoner. Unfortunately, the remaining details were all about the terrified little juvenile Pink One who had saved them. If he could talk with it after morning meal, then perhaps it would be more sedate. Sal opened the door into the mess hall and had to do a double take. On one side was the food dispensers, and most of the passengers sitting crammed so close together that they were practically on top of one another. On the other side was the Pink One, sitting alone, with more than half of the mess hall to itself. He should have known that the passenger gossip would have spread fast. Even more strangely, the Pink One had as much food in front of it as the rest of the room's occupants combined. Seeing Sal enter, the Pink One made eye contact, did a funny wrinkling thing with its lower face, and gestured him over. Trying not to tremble visibly, Sal obeyed. Nathan was quietly amused. Having finally gotten a good night's rest, he had gotten up, bracing himself for the usual stupid little questions. Questions that had never come. In fact, everyone seemed to be doing their very best to avoid him. Those who couldn't, keeping as much distance between them as possible. He must have made more of an impression than he thought. He was just thinking of how he could abuse this for his entertainment, when the captain, easily identifiable by the bling on his label, entered. Instead of heading over to the food dispensers, he just stood there in the doorway, looking around. Nathan caught his eye and waved him over with a smile. He would have to apologize for taking the captain's law into his own hands yesterday. Might as well do it as soon as he got the chance. Idly, Nathan checked his translator as the captain sat down opposite him at the table. Finally, someone who wasn't terrified of him. Maybe he could have a decent conversation on this trip after all. Sal was surprised at the Pink One's cheeriness and willingness to talk about the incident. In fact, Sal was surprised that a juvenile was so eloquent and elaborate with his words. Behind the translator, its low tone could even be considered as perhaps slightly musical. Too bad the translator device rendered the conversation monotone. He was sure it was missing the subtle inflections that the little alien was surely conveying. Nonetheless, the Pink One introduced himself as Nate, and his species as human. It answered all his questions for his report while continuing to flex its face and consume the food, all the food, in front of it. Sal was quietly proud of his self-control as he managed to clandestinely ask about humans' military prowess and population. The foolish juvenile happily told him everything, including to Sal's immense relief that humans had few natural weapons or armor, mostly relying on their good size to strength ratio. More, the species were rare in the wider galaxy, preferring to keep to their own systems out on the fringes of space. Maybe this species was nothing to worry about after all. Feeling himself slowly relax, Sal decided to ask some personal questions of the pink human. Get to know the passenger a bit better now that it wasn't so terrifying, and had apologized for yesterday's actions and put them into context. Sal asked Nate how old he was, and nearly fell off his perch. If that's how old their juveniles can get, then this must be one of the longest-lived species in the galaxy by far. Nathan was a bit startled by the captain's clear shock. He had been enjoying the simple but direct conversation all the way up until Sal asked how old he was. What was the big deal? 38 wasn't that unusual for a retired professional football player.